He took 3 whacks from a federal officer's baton and a face full of pepper spray, and the guy barely budged.
I've taken worse beatings than that.
We talked one-on-one with the Navy vet dubbed Captain Portland about why he decided to attend his very first protest.
I wanted to go down and talk to them about it.
And what he learned while he was down there.
They don't care who you are. They're going to beat you anyway.
Also, just because it's nice out doesn't mean COVID-19 has gone on vacation.
Testing capacity, unfortunately, is strained.
In fact, in a lot of facets, it's worse than ever. And the Multnomah County Health Department pointed to a specific kind of gathering driving cases. And no, it's not the protests. And a love letter to local news at a time when it's needed most. Here's the story. Hey everybody, I am Maggie Vespa. My name is not on this show, as you know, but Dan Haggerty is human, basically, and he needed a day off. So he'll be back here tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'm here. Don't freak out. We're here. The story team is still on the job. We're one, as you probably know by this point, big, happy, nerdy, question-loving family, and we're proud of our nerdiness. That's not an insult. All of this to say, we really want to hear from you. So sound off on Twitter or Instagram. You can use the hashtag HeyDan on those platforms. You can reach out to Dan or me on Facebook, and you can email thestory@kgw.com. Our teams are always watching for your feedback. They're watching right now. And we want your questions and your comments. They drive our coverage on this show. So please, seriously, talk to us. We, as always, are listening, and we read every comment. And I mean every comment. And proof of that is coming up. And one little word, a little teaser for you, cereal. That's the topic. It'll make sense. Trust me. In the meantime, we have a lot to get to on this Monday, so let's start the show. And with that, we turn right to our big story. We're coming up now on 2 months of nightly protests in Portland, a routine that, of course, began in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Since then, Portland has taken center stage for the consistency and the intensity of our protests and for the violent response from federal officers, whom we've seen shoot a protester in the face with a less than lethal round, fracturing his skull. We've seen them pull people into unmarked minivans, only to reportedly let them go hours later with no record of those mysterious arrests. And last week, we saw a slew of lawsuits against federal agencies responsible for these officers, calling the tactics unconstitutional and an abuse of power. Now, amid all of this, we've drawn the ire of the White House and the eye of national media. And this weekend, amid all of that attention, we saw some firsts on the streets of downtown. This one actually is getting a lot of attention online. A bunch of moms showed up at the protests. They stood on the front line, held signs, and chanted, telling federal officers to leave Portland, and they said to leave their kids alone. Local politicians also came to the protests to show support, including a county commissioner right there and physician who you will hear from in a minute. And I realize those headlines are rather light, but let's be very clear. Things were violent again this weekend. This instance from Saturday night, federal officers downtown, you saw this in the open, they beat and gassed a Navy veteran who, as you can see, was just standing there. He was unflinching for a while. He said he just wanted to talk to officers about what they were doing. You'll hear from him in a minute as well. Around the same time, someone lit a fire inside the Portland Police Association headquarters on North Lombard. Police declared that protest a riot and said people were throwing rocks and balloons filled with paint. The next morning, the PPA president and other community leaders begged for the violence in Portland to stop.
If you want to make change, if you're serious about change, then I'm begging you, as a citizen of this city for the last 32 years, to ask you to put down your need for violence and meet us. Have a moratorium and meet us so that we can talk and find out how we can come together.
So as a result of all of this, tensions are definitely playing out politically. On the national stage, President Trump on TV and on Twitter has been defending and in some cases championing the actions of federal officers all week. And today, prominent Republican Senator Rand Paul slammed the actions of those officers, tweeting an article, you can see it there, about Portland and about those mysterious minivan arrests. And then Senator Paul wrote, "We cannot give up liberty for security. Local law enforcement can and should be handling these situations in our cities, but there is no place," he wrote, "for federal troops or unidentified federal agents rounding people up at will." Again, Senator Rand Paul there. We're also seeing local clashes. Over the weekend, Portland City Commissioner Dan Haggerty tweeted that she had had enough, and she told the mayor, Ted Wheeler, who also serves as the city's police commissioner, to take action and control police officers or give her control of the police bureau. Now, for days, the mayor didn't respond. Then, this afternoon, we got a news release. In it, he said he would continue to serve as police commissioner. He's not handing it over. He also announced he and several other mayors in cities like Chicago, Seattle, and Atlanta had sent joint letters to the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and congressional leaders demanding the president pull back federal officers and calling their tactics an abuse of power and a violation of the Constitution. Now, our Kyle Laboshi today got the chance to talk to two of the people that we just mentioned just now. One of them being that Multnomah County Commissioner, Sharon Myron, who got tear gassed this weekend at a protest downtown. The other one being that Navy vet, Chris David, who attended his very first protest this weekend, and now he needs surgery on his hand.
He was sort of walking around going whack, 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 whack all the way around. He was trying.
His hand is broken in two places and will require surgery. Chris David has bruises up and down his body after being struck by federal officers during a protest in downtown Portland this weekend.
I had no intention of leaving until I had to. And I wanted to show that I was not doing anything provocative or aggressive. I was just standing there with my arms by my sides. That's all I was doing.
The 53-year-old Portland man had never been to a protest before, but after seeing news accounts claiming federal officers in unmarked vans were arresting protesters without probable cause, David decided he wanted to chat with them about it. So Saturday night, he headed downtown.
You know, I put on my Naval Academy sweatshirt, my Navy wrestling hat, and my backpack with all my CB patches on it, because I was hoping that some of them were veterans, and that them seeing me as a veteran would allow us to actually talk.
David said he stood on the street off federal property when 8 to 10 federal officers came out of the courthouse.
From what I saw, there were no cohesive tactics to what they were doing. They were just almost like a gang with sticks, whacking people. There was no attempt to de-escalate. Their only intent seemed to be to engage and to escalate the aggression on both sides.
This weekend saw some of the largest protest crowds in weeks in downtown Portland. Hundreds of demonstrators seemed galvanized by the presence of federal officers who were called in to help protect federal buildings. So far, the federal courthouse in Portland has seen more than $50,000 in damage. Protesters and local leaders argue federal officers have used overly aggressive tactics, including tear gas.
I couldn't see anything. My face was burning. My throat was burning, so I could barely swallow.
Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron was on the periphery of the protest crowd Saturday night when she was hit with tear gas.
There is no level of, damage to some property in a park or damage to a building that justifies the trauma and the actual injury caused by the wide dispersal of tear gas.
Federal officers aren't just being challenged on the street, but also the courtroom. Oregon's Attorney General filed a lawsuit on Friday against federal officers, claiming they're using unlawful tactics. Kyle Laboshi, KGW News.
All right, so obviously all eyes are on Portland right now, but a lot is actually happening in Salem as well. Our elected leaders are working on more proposals for police reform. And on Friday, Deputy Portland Police Chief Chris Davis testified about officers' tactics during these protests, and lawmakers had a lot of questions about what they've been seeing.
Is it possible that some of the folks who are organizing to create a violent response know exactly what triggers you and know how to play that particular game, so that you are suddenly doing something to people who are bystanders, who are not down there necessarily even to just pay attention, but because they have nothing else to do. There are folks who are medics who are getting attacked as well. as well as people who are handing out water bottles.
The people organizing the violence every night, I think that is probably their goal. I think that's what makes these situations probably the hardest situation in policing to manage, because you have to deal with people who are just standing there, and I think that is an intentional tactic to get people to just stand in front of the group so others can stand behind the group and start throwing things at the police and try to initiate a response.
So then another lawmaker asked Deputy Chief Davis if he thinks police are escalating things just by being there. And he acknowledged that, yeah, that definitely happens. And he also says they've had no choice but to get involved.
And for a number of nights, actually, as this has gone on, we've tried to keep our police officers just completely out of sight in the Justice Center and not send them outside unless it got so dangerous in terms of fires being lit and threats to safety that we had no choice. And unfortunately, most of those nights, our group chose to escalate things to the point where we had to go out and intervene.
As you can see, it was a really direct conversation. He was also asked about the Portland Police Bureau's use of tear gas, and we'll play some of that for you tomorrow right here on The Story. In the meantime, tonight, when The Story continues, an extremely important question about cereal. Serious. And the Multnomah County Health Department says recent spikes in COVID-19 are not coming from protests, they're coming from somewhere else. We'll explain. Also, 51 years ago today, humans landed on the moon, and the KGW Vault shows us how Portland reacted.
I never thought it could happen.
I jumped up with joy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Story. I'm Maggie Vespa in for Dan today. Even though he's gone, he'll be back tomorrow. The hashtag is always the same. It's Hey Dan, and you can reach us with that on Twitter or on Instagram. You can also just message or post to Dan or me on Facebook. You can email thestory@kgw.com. We're so reachable, and when we say reach out, we mean reach out about anything. Now, to be clear, we usually mean anything in the news or anything kind of like of news value. That said, that is clearly subjective. And with that, here is a moment of levity, courtesy of Don. He emailed us saying, first, you have plenty of stories about Black Lives Matter and COVID. On a lighter note, I want to know about something completely different. So what does Don want to know about? Well, I'll tell you. He wrote, why do dry cereal boxes not have resealable bags inside? $4 for a few ounces of grain should have a pretty high profit margin. And then he said, even my socks come in a resealable bag that I will never use. And he told us that he challenged us to get an actual answer because he's been wondering for decades about this issue. Okay, sir. So we sincerely love the relationship that we have with our viewers on this show, and we love how this is a conversation, like a two-way street. But wow, how in the world did you land on that question? And I want to be very clear. I'm not condemning your choice. I'm fascinated by your question. I think it's hilarious. And when I posted it on social media, other people wanted to know too. And in fact, one of our editors here at KGW even messaged us at The Story, and he said that he and his partner were just talking about this very issue. So okay, that in mind, we have producers who are obsessed with researching stuff, and one of them found the answer within minutes. So here we go to the crack journalistic source that is Kellogg's website. And their company wrote, we get this question a lot, and we have definitely looked into it. Unfortunately, our current packaging is set up just couldn't cope with the addition of Ziplocs, as it would make the process much slower and much more expensive too. They went on to say, because this was in depth, we do have a select few products with Ziplocs that are packaged in external facilities, but it isn't a feasible option for all of our products. So it basically boils down to money. And Don, we hope that answers your question. As we said, we hope this is proof we read everything. Now, that said, genuinely, we don't think Don was saying that the stories of the day, the pandemic, and the historic protests don't have merit. We genuinely get that this is like a never-ending barrage of headlines tied to those two topics. And we get that that can be overwhelming. And it's why we decided to take a break and talk about cereal roughly 15 minutes into our show. But The break has to end now. We're so sorry, Don. We have to get back to the pandemic, in part because today we got a briefing from the Multnomah County Health Department. And to be frank with you, they gave us a lot of stark warnings about things. The spread of the virus, they say, is accelerating. The death rate is going up. And contact tracers are only catching about 1 in 10 cases, so 10% of cases. There's a lot to be concerned about. About the only good news we heard was that hospital capacity is okay for now, but there was something else that Health Officer Dr. Jennifer Vines was concerned about, and that is testing.
Testing capacity, unfortunately, is strained. This has to do with our dependence on the national supply chain, and it's expected to go on for at least the next month or two. It's estimated to be down by about 20%. It's also, I think, fairly well known that the turnaround times, so the time from collecting the test to somebody actually getting the result, has become prolonged up to several days and sometimes over a week, sometimes even longer, as long as 11, 12 days. And so this, of course, makes our ability to keep up with this virus very difficult, given how quickly it's transmitted and given how quickly we're trying to notify people of their positive test results and quickly get in touch with people they may have exposed.
All right, so one of the most consistent questions that you ask us is, are our test numbers shooting up because of protests? And the answer from the beginning, experts have said, has been no. But since it takes a while for the virus to show itself, we figured we would ask again, just in case.
We have not. We've looked and we cannot find an association there. And when I say we've looked, we ask people about any kind of gathering, any mass gathering in the time that they were potentially infectious. We have invited anybody who participated in the protests to our Multnomah County testing site, and we have yet to detect a contribution, a meaningful contribution of the protest activity to our increase in cases.
All right, so again, they say no. Dr. Vines says the biggest reason that we're seeing such a spike in cases are household and social gatherings, so basically parties. They say people are letting their guards down and taking risks in those settings. And in short, Dr. Vines says, please stop doing that. And she emphasized, if you're going to see people, including family, hang out outside. It's beautiful out. Keep that 6-foot distance. And you guessed it, wear a mask. And by the way, we saw a lot of people not doing those 3 things over this weekend. They were outside. Obviously, it was warm, which meant a lot of people were at the beaches, but they weren't wearing masks. They weren't staying distant in all settings. So with Dr. Vines' advice in mind, and given that scientists know more and more about this virus each day, we wanted to know, how much safer are you when you're outside? So Keely Chalmers tried to find out.
It looked like a typical hot summer day at Broughton Beach on the Columbia over the weekend. A packed parking lot and a packed beach. The difference this time, it's in the midst of a pandemic. And while most groups attempted to maintain a 6-foot distance, not everyone did all the time. And most were not wearing masks. The guidelines in Oregon and Washington include wearing a mask even outdoors if you can't socially distance 6 feet from others.
While there has been documented transmission from outdoor large crowded gatherings, it appears to be much lower than indoors, but there's still a risk.
Air quality expert Dr. Richard Corsi says the main concern with crowds is close contact transmission, but he says sometimes 6 feet might not even be enough.
It's if the wind's blowing in the right direction and somebody's speaking from 15 feet away and even a large droplet comes out of their mouth, if the wind's blowing in the right direction, that can reach you.
At Selwood Riverside Park, some wore masks, some didn't, but those we talked to weren't worried.
Here, you can keep your space. More people than I expected, but it looks like everybody's pretty well staying socially distant, so that's good.
While at George Rogers Park in Lake Oswego, we found most people were wearing masks, with the exception of youngsters. Corsi says that's okay as long as they keep their distance.
We're seeing a higher and higher percentage of children getting COVID-19 or being diagnosed with COVID-19. In some cases, I've seen, half the rate of adults.
But what if you can't maintain that distance? Say you're on a narrow trail. Here's what Dr. Corsi did in that situation.
I personally put my mask on, and when I got close to them, I actually held my breath until I was past them about 10 feet.
Because he says when it comes to enjoying these hot, sunny summer days outdoors, sometimes 6 feet without a mask isn't enough. If you can, keep maybe 10, 15, even 20 feet, just to be safe. In Southwest Portland, Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
All right, good to know. Well, let's lighten things back up again. Today is the 51st anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took their first steps on the lunar surface. And the day after that huge moment in history, KGW sent reporter John Tuttle to talk to people on the streets of Portland about what they had witnessed on TV. So here is what we dug up from the KGW vault.
Thanks to television, an estimated 400 million persons, including a lot of Portlanders, were there when history was made on the moon.
I think it's, by God, I never saw a thing in my life as wonderful it was. And I hope he just comes down as well as he went up. Best wishes, that's what we hope. For man, we'll never forget it. We'll a holiday like Colombia, found this country, that's how we find this. Over thousands of years. We should think of this time of year, should do a thing like that. I can't believe it's unbelievable.
I think it was fantastic. I just think it's unbelievable, and it's just marvelous that we've accomplished so much.
Can I ask why you watched it?
Well, mainly because I'm interested in seeing what's going on. The children are interested, and it's educational, and it's something they'll never see again.
I thought it was fantastic, too, because I never thought it could happen until I did see it. It was fantastic, too. I liked it. And I liked it. I see it in Newport, too. I did.
Pardon me, have you got a minute? Yeah. Can I ask how you spent yesterday, what you did?
Oh, watching TV.
Did you see the lunar module come down on the Earth's surface?
Yeah.
What was your reaction? What kind of emotions did you have as you listened to it?
Pretty exciting.
And the moonwalk?
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it real well.
Well, I kind of worried about them a little bit. I thought maybe that they could get trapped in some way and, just be a problem.
Oh, fantastic. What kind of thoughts went through your head as you saw them on the moon?
Oh, I was wondering, it's just like Columbus discovering America and we discovering a moon.
My heart was beating really fast and I got scared, and when they walked out, I jumped up with joy. And I went, yay. And it's good to be an American, because first on the moon, that's all.
Who revved their engine in that perfect moment? That was so cool. We love digging around the vault for our old stories, but we need some ideas, seriously, for things to look for. So help us out. You can use the hashtag. Again, hey Dan, tell us what you want to see. We're actually going to read some of your comments as well after the break. And we're going to finish the story by giving some mad props to some Portland journalists who have just been killing it lately. Hey guys, before we go, if you watch the story a lot, you know we love to point out other stories from local news outlets that we think are also worth your time. It's a segment that we like to call Worth Your Time. There it is. Thing is, local journalists in Portland have straight up been killing it the last few weeks. So we wanted to end the show with sort of a love letter to our well-respected peeps at other outlets and share some of the incredible work that you should check out, and that you should also send to all the friends and relatives who are asking what in the world is going on in Portland. This is a great place to start. OPB put together this exhaustive play-by-play of the last 50-plus days of protests in Portland, starting all the way back on June 5th after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And from there, they go all the way up to this past weekend. It is a great crash course on how we got here. Super helpful. The Portland Mercury talked to Portland Police Association President Daryl Turner after the bureau chief said that Turner had met with Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf, and they got some really great insights into what the two discussed in that meeting. The Willamette Week found out those unmarked vans that the feds have been putting protesters in, well, they might be enterprise rental cars, and you can read all about why that's basically a big no-no in the Willamette Week. And then finally, the Oregonian looked back at 21 of the most memorable protests in Portland, the history of our nickname, Little Beirut, and how this city got its reputation as the protest capital of America. And don't just read. If you can, please support these guys by subscribing, donating, picking up a paper, or at least just giving them some clicks and checking out these articles, because it is more important than ever to know what's going on in your community. And with that, what's going on here is you guys are sending in a ton of comments. Leah said, hey, Dan, when you talk about the situation in Portland and say things got violent, you need to clarify the source of the violence. We did. I think I know the line that you're talking about, and that was at the very top of our elaboration on who committed which acts of violence. So I get maybe you didn't like that line, but that was like a solid 3-minute segment followed by Kyle's 2-minute package. So I think we did that. Feel free to write back about the entire segment. I think one line kind of dilutes it down a little bit too much. Diana said, shame on you for portraying the protesters as victims. They were given multiple orders to disperse and chose not to. Lawful orders to disperse. I don't think we ever used the word victim, and I don't think we portrayed them as such. We showed what happened after that, and we'll continue to do that night after night. But I would disagree with that characterization of how we did it. Feel free to respond back, though. I'm really interested. And then Aubrey said, I just want to say I absolutely love Maggie's excitement for nerdy things and nerdy weird things. I am what I am, Aubrey. I really appreciate it. I hope that you share that excitement, too. Again, guys, Dan will be back here tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us on this story. Laurel Porter is coming up next with the news at 6:30.